Good evening.
Good evening, Deacon.
Let's start with a little trivia. What day of the year are the most phone calls made? Mother's Day. It seems that on Mother's Day, everyone wants to call home. What do you think happens on Father's Day? Anyone want to make a guess? The most collect calls. Personally, I believe that's okay because dads like to be needed. They like to be called on for wisdom and help. Mom's job is to fix clothes and make meals, to heal a wounded body. And Dad's job is to fix broken stuff and to defend the family, especially daughters. I read somewhere this week something that was entitled 50 Good Reasons Why It's Good to Be a Man. Now, I won't read them all, but I did put together a top 10 list. Number 10, you know stuff about army tanks. Number 9, you can go to the bathroom without a support group. Number 8, if someone forgets to invite you to something, they can still be your friend. Number 7, you can drop by to see a friend without bringing a little gift. Number 6, if another guy shows up at the same party in the same outfit, you might become lifelong buddies. Number 5, one wallet, one pair of shoes, one color, all seasons. Number 4, there's always a game on somewhere. Number 3, your pals can be trusted never to trap you with, so notice anything different? Number 2, if something mechanical doesn't work, you bash it with a hammer and throw it across the room. And the number 1 answer was, you can do your nails with a pocket knife. Dads are different. Dads just seem to be like some of the tools that are left in the garage that are just sitting around until you need them. Sometimes we treat Jesus just like that, as if he were one of those tools sitting there until we need him. Dads are different, and Jesus is certainly different, because he doesn't wait for the need to come to him. He goes to the need. And in today's gospel lesson, Jesus comes into this territory for the only time in Luke's gospel, and he encounters a man possessed by demons. Lots and lots of demons. The man runs around naked and lives alone in the cemetery. His hometown people have tried to bring his wildness under control by binding him with chains, but he broke the chains. Finally, they wrote him off as impossibly crazy and walked a wide berth around his cemetery home. If Jesus had asked their advice, the neighbors probably would have told him that the man was dangerous. Stay away is probably what they would have said. But Jesus didn't ask their advice. Just as a good cop moves toward trouble and a good firefighter enters a burning building, Jesus went where the need was. Lots of people needed Jesus, but nobody needed him that day more than this man, this poor, naked, lonely, wild, possessed demon man. So Jesus walks into the cemetery, makes his way through the tombs until he finds himself face to face with the demons that were tormenting this man. When Jesus asked their name, they replied, Legion. Now a legion was about 6,000 soldiers, representing overwhelming power, power that almost nobody could resist. And at that very moment, Roman legions occupied Israel, their presence afoot on Jewish necks, a knife at their throats. A Roman soldier, tired of carrying his pack, could compel any passerby to carry it for miles. Roman tax collectors took the people's money and sent it to Rome to be spent on foolish entertainments. And in just such a manner, a legion of demons ruled over this crazy, naked man, making him miserable and ruining his life. But as powerful as they were, and they were powerful indeed, the demons knew that they were no match for Jesus. When they looked at Jesus, they saw God's power at work, and they could see what was coming. So they pled with Jesus not to send them back to the abyss, begged instead to enter a herd of swine, and Jesus allowed it. That didn't serve the demons well, however, because the pigs rushed into the sea and drowned, presumably drowning the demons also. And the man who had been crazy became sane. The man who had been naked puts on clothing, and the man who had run around wildly now sat calmly at Jesus' feet. You know, when we read a story like that, many of us are torn. We want to believe the Bible, but we question whether there are really such things as demons and wonder if the story could be true. Perhaps the people saw Jesus calm this wild man and thought that he had driven out his demons. Perhaps a herd of pigs ran into the sea and people connected that story with this man. Well, perhaps we aren't really sure what to think. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure exactly what happened that day. I am, however, going to suggest that we not too quickly dismiss this story. While I don't believe in demons as little gremlins with forked tails, I do believe that demons are real, and they do exist. I recognize the broad outline of the story as not so different from things that happen each and every day, right here in our hometowns. I see this story, in it, the presence of evil, and I also see in it the power of God. And those are forces with which I am very well acquainted. I read all too frequently about people living demonic lives, and on occasion I find myself sitting in the same room with one of them. That can be frightening, but more often it's frustrating, because I want to do what Jesus did. I want to reach out and touch these wild, self-destructive people. I want to help them free themselves from the demons. I want to rid them of the evil that controls their lives. I want to calm their wildness and prepare them for a normal life among normal people. And I want the miracle to happen right away, just as it did for Jesus. But I must admit that it seldom happens quickly, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all. And I also admit that the forces of good and evil, of God and evil, are at work in me also. And I admit that good and God do not always win. And if you're fully honest with yourself, you will admit that the forces of good and evil and the forces of God and evil tear at you also. And you will admit that good and God do not always win. Some of you may remember Adolf Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann was captured and tried for engineering the Holocaust. And one of the most dramatic moments in the trial that occurred was when a man named Yehiel Dinur, a Holocaust survivor, entered the courtroom to testify against Eichmann, who had condemned this man to a concentration camp many years earlier. And when he walked into the courtroom, he suddenly stopped and he began to sob uncontrollably, and he fainted. Later, in a 60 Minutes interview with Mike Wallace, Dinur explained what had happened. He had seen Eichmann sitting there in the courtroom, and he had been overwhelmed at the sight. It wasn't that he had been suddenly overcome by fear or hatred. Instead, he was startled to see that Eichmann was not the godlike Nazi officer whom he remembered, the man with whom the wave of a hand could save you or sentence you to death. Instead, the Eichmann in the courtroom that day was just an ordinary-looking old man. And it suddenly dawned on him, but for the grace of God, go all of us. He said, I was afraid about myself. I saw that I was also capable of this. I am like he is. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who survived the Soviet gulags to win a Nobel Prize, put it this way. He said, the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every single human being. And so, we all need saving. So Jesus comes to save us just as he saved the wild man in today's gospel. Jesus does that in several thousand different ways. The man whom Jesus healed wanted to go with Jesus. He wanted to leave his hometown to follow Jesus wherever he would go. But Jesus, who had called others to follow him, told this man not to follow. Instead, he told the man, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." And the man did just that. He became a missionary to his hometown, telling them what Jesus had done for him. That must have been a very powerful witness, because it's easy to ignore a preacher's sermon, but it's hard to ignore a changed life. Every single time this man's neighbors saw him, from that moment on, they had to think of Jesus. You know, we could learn a lesson from that, because Jesus wants to save us, and he wants us to tell people what he has done, to show people what he has done to become living, breathing witnesses to his power. We are saved by Christ to be saviors of others. Every single person in this parish, young or old, rich or poor, can be a hometown missionary for Jesus Christ. Every man, woman, and child in this parish has the opportunity daily to witness for Christ. That witness will take the form of a Christ-filled life. Just as the people of Gerasa could not ignore the quality of the man's new life, the people of Raway will not be able to ignore the quality of our Christ-filled lives. There is no Christian too poor or too weak or infirm to witness for Christ. No witness speaks with more authority than that of a person who has a glad heart for Christ. And no witness speaks more loudly than a person who has reason to be bitter, but who instead lives in the joy of Jesus Christ. Ask yourself this question this week: what can I do? Pray about it. Listen for God's call and obey. We all long for heaven where God is, but we have it in our power to be in heaven with him right now and to be happy with him at this very moment. Mother Teresa explains that being happy with him means loving as he loves, helping as he helps, giving as he gives, serving as he serves, rescuing as he rescues, being in touch with him for each and every of the 24 hours of every day of our lives, and touching him in all of his distressing disguises. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to God.
Slava Jesus Christus.
Slava